Hey guys, how you doing? You having a good day so far? Well, let me give you a brief recap on mine before we get into it. So, late last night, the power went out in my entire town, and I went to sleep thinking, it'll probably be back on by the time I wake up, but no dice. I wake up and it's still off, and it continued to be off for another 7 hours, so like half of my day was gone right there. Have you ever went more than 15 hours without power? I had to sharpen a stick and go hunt out in the woods for wild boar to get my nutrition for the day. I had to learn how to make a fire. My entire town began to regress into a primitive tribal society. Good news is I had this thing on standby, so, well, we all know who was about to be elected village chief, and we were right about to build that sacrificial altar to our new pantheon of sun deities, but then the power clicked back on and we all went back to our homes and continued our daily lives. I took a shower, and now I'm doing this. Okay, so... The ancient weapon known as Pluton. Legends speak of it as a mythical battleship constructed in the Void Century, whose origins are unknown, except that its origin is it was built in Water 7. But who was it built by? Why was it built? And more importantly, where is it right now? I hope to elucidate you on some of these questions, or even if I can't exactly tell you where it is right now, because I don't know, maybe I could shed some light on some other places that you haven't really thought of, or another angle at it. So, let's get right to it. Okay, so Pluton was first mentioned during the Alabasta arc, back when Crocodile was doing his whole Mr. Zero, head of Baroque Works, crime syndicate, Bond villain, twirling a wine glass because he is so suave. He mentioned Project Utopia. That was like the ultimate goal of Baroque Works, you know, so whenever one of his officer agents came to him and like, hey, Mr. Zero, why are we doing all of this to begin with? And he's like, oh, well, Project Utopia. I was like, well, Project Utopia. Utopia's in the title. It's gotta be a good thing. Yeah, Project Utopia basically came down to Crocodile getting access to a giant F-off battleship that can obliterate an island in one shot, and, it's never really been stated what he was planning on doing with it after he got his hands on it, but it certainly couldn't have been a good thing. Considering Crocodile's grudge with Whitebeard, how he went to the New World in his early pirate days, got the shit beat out of him by Pops himself, retreated back to the first half of the Grand Line like a wimp, and built up a crime syndicate just so he can get his hands on Pluton, you can assume he was probably gonna get his hands on it and then roll up to the Moby Dick and be like, hey, check it out, Whitebeard, you still think I'm a wimp? Fire! And then they could just obliterate Whitebeard's fleet, and then after that, maybe he'll take over an island or two. I don't know. So later on, it was then brought up during Ennie's lobby, because CP9 was looking for it, or rather, they were looking for the original blueprints of Pluton, so that revealed, like, they don't actually know where it is, okay? Which is a very important hint, because if the world government doesn't know where it is definitely hidden somewhere good. Maybe it's even on Rafto with the One Piece. Maybe it's part of the One Piece. Who knows? Maybe the Oro Jackson is Pluton. I don't think that, but I've seen a lot of theories about it. Because when I envision Pluton, I think of, honestly, like a modern-day, like, steel warship. Like a modern-day, like, Navy fleet would have. Something that would be very out of place in the One Piece world because we see, like, wooden sailing vessels, but that's what would make it so imposing. Like, they open up this giant, I don't know, undersea dock area, and you see this giant warship, like, ripped right out of, like, modern society, and it's right there, and it's equipped with all these really advanced guns and, like, nuclear missiles attached to it or something. Now, I don't actually think, like, nuclear missiles, but certainly the firepower on this thing is strong enough to obliterate an island, so it's gotta have some kind of punch. That was the way I viewed it. So the deal was, it was built way back during the Void Century in Water 7 by a group of the best shipwrights in the land, and they eventually began to pass down the blueprints of Pluton through the generations until they eventually landed at Tom's lap, who is the fishman father figure of Iceberg and Frankie, and the whole reason they kept passing on the blueprints was not so, the shipwrights could build a warship and take over the world. The whole point of the blueprints was in case the Pluton got discovered by a party that would use it for villainy, like Crocodile or the world government, because if you figure if the world government gets their hands on it, it's also not going to be a good thing. Then again, if you really think about it, I mean, can anybody really have a giant warship and do something good with it? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, let's say the Straw Hats find Pluton, right? Let's say the Straw Hats just stumble upon an island and Pluton is docked there. Do you think Luffy's gonna want to be like, hey guys, come on, let's get on Pluton and go around blowing up islands? Usopp's like, that sounds like a great idea, Luffy. If you weren't going to use the thing, you just wouldn't take it. All right, so you'd figure anybody that got their hands on Pluton that was actually serious about, captaining the vessel and sailing it anywhere, they weren't going to be good because it's a warship, right? So, yeah, they figure someday they're going to be somebody that's going to find Pluton, and if that's the situation, we need to have an equally strong weapon, another Pluton, in order to fight against it. Because, the only other weapons capable of defeating Pluton, I'm assuming, were the other ancient weapons, but let's say they don't have access to them. We should probably keep the blueprints as just a failsafe, So, there's that, right? Now, why was Pluton built to begin with if it was such a crazy battleship and they went through the trouble of saving the blueprints and hiding it somewhere? I think that the Pluton was very integral for maybe defending the original land, maybe the ancient kingdom, back during the time when the world government started to gather power. The only problem with this is that if this ancient kingdom did develop the Pluton in order to defend their kingdom from being taken over by the world government, then why didn't it work? Why did the world government succeed in taking over the world if they had the Pluton at their the other kingdom was fighting with Pluton? Because it wasn't the world government that built that thing. It probably had something to do with the ancient kingdom, right? So yeah, now you could say that any number of things happened. You could maybe say that the ancient kingdom, maybe the people that had the Pluton, maybe they wanted it originally, we need to build a weapon to defend our land. But then when they got their hands on this, weapon that could just obliterate an island like that, maybe they started having second guesses with it, and they didn't really want to use it, because if they used it, it would maybe lead to more devastation and death than even the world government could succeed at. So they decided not to use the weapon and instead try to hide it somewhere. And then when the world government took over, they just started on this massive, centuries-long campaign trying to find the damn thing, which hasn't succeeded. It was only recently in the One Piece world, the last decade or so, when they even found out that the original blueprints for the thing were at Water 7. And so then that's when they sent the CP9 for that 5-year undercover deep dive mission trying to infiltrate the island to try to get the blueprints from Iceberg. Iceberg didn't even end up having them, but they eventually figured out Frankie had them. So that was only a recent thing. So for hundreds of years ago, I would imagine the world government is searching every island they can think of. I'm sure all the islands that were under their employ that were, part of the world government, they were looking and trying to find something that would hint to Pluton. Now, here's the other thing that doesn't make any sense in this whole paradigm here. So the location of Pluton is found on a poneglyph, which is located in the Alabasta Castle dungeons, or their tombs, right? So the world government is connected to Alabasta. In fact, the Nefeltari family is one of the original families that, started the world government. It's just that they decided to stay in their homeland and not go to Marijua. It's a little weird that poneglyph was able to stay for so long in that country and the world government didn't know about it. Because the world government does not play around with poneglyphs. Remember what happened at Ohara? I think we remember what happened at Ohara. So it's if the world government found out that Cobra had a poneglyph in his country, I'm not saying they would have straight up Buster called it, because it is the Nefeltari family. They are kind of, unique. They're not technically world nobles, but I like to think they hold a special status that's different from all the other regular nobles in the world, because they are one of the founding families. But they would have done something about it. They wouldn't have just let that lay there, right? They would have taken it back with them or something. Cobra, you gotta give us your poneglyph if you want to still be a member of the world government or something. So the world government didn't know it was there. Crocodile had to find out it was there through his own channel of information, and he eventually got to the point, and that's why he employed Nico Robin to read the poneglyph for him. Robin lied, though. Robin lied to Crocodile, stating that, all this poneglyph reads is just history and nothing more. Crocodile figured that she was lying, which she was, and later on, Crocodile, he gets defeated by Luffy, and then Cobra's there, and Cobra asks Nico Robin, he's like, the location of the ancient weapon Pluton is definitely on that. I'm assuming he was told this by his father, who was the king before him, and then before that, and then before that, probably all the way back from the beginning. Hell, that might have been one of the original reasons why the Nefeltari family decided to stay in their land. Picture this. 900 years ago, during the Void Century, you had the 20 families that defeated the ancient kingdom, and they came together to join the world government. Maybe the Nefeltari family felt sorry for, you know, the ancient kingdom, you know, falling. They felt genuine grief for their loss and what they did, and what they're creating, the world government, isn't going to be in the world's best interest. So they decided to stay in their own land where they knew they had the location of this ancient weapon. All right. And so maybe they did that because if the Nefeltari family back then would have joined up with the world government, maybe eventually through the generations they would become the same conceited bastards as the celestial dragons are. If they stayed in their homeland, which was Alabasta, they would keep like their own culture strong, and it would be like, okay, you know, you must guard this poneglyph in this tomb, you can't let the world government know because it's the secret of the ancient weapon, and it's not going to be a good thing if they get their hands on that. So that's why a lot of the members of the Nefeltari family, Cobra and everybody, they're still a part of the world government. They attend reverie and anything, but they're kind of like, you know, dissidents. They're kind of the ones that are going to voice the opinion. Like all the other noble families, all the other celestial dragons, they aren't going to speak against the world government because that's where they get their paychecks and everything. So, but Cobra though, Cobra would be like, hey, I want to talk to you, Gorosei, about something. You're messing up the world, and I want to know why. And that's not, he's not asking the questions you're not supposed to ask, right? So the location of Pluton is found on Alabasta, but that's not actually where the Pluton is. I highly doubt the battleship itself is somewhere in Alabasta. So where could it be? If it's not in Alabasta, and it's not in Water 7, because that's where it was built, and that's where the blueprints were, they weren't going to keep, you know, the key next to the safe, so to speak. So where is it? Well, there are a few places we can roll out. Okay, you can pretty much roll out Wano and Totland as any possibility, because if Big Mom or Kaido had the freaking Pluton at their disposal, they would not hesitate with that thing. They would bust it out. So Kaido has been rolling over Wano for 20-something years. I'm pretty sure he would have found it by now if it was somewhere in that land. You know what I mean? Now, another place you can think to roll out immediately is any island that the world government rules over, because you'd figure like those would be the islands, those would be the first places you would check. You know, all the 200-something nations that create the world government, where the world government can send their cipher pole agents very easily. They can send a marine blockade to like block out the ports if they wanted to. They would scour those islands. You might think that, but then go back to the same problem we had with Alabasta and the fact that the tomb was unknown to the WG, the WB, the WG. They didn't know it was there, so it might be possible even a country, a kingdom that's allied with the world government, they might have a secret area where the Pluton is being kept, and it's just right under their noses, but they're able to keep it secret, okay, while still being part of the world government. Another possibility I thought of is that the Pluton might just be on some random uninhabited island somewhere in the New World. I'm pretty sure if we're going to find it, it is going to be in the New World, because if it isn't in the New World, I mean, I guess it's possible it could be in one of the Four Blues or something like that, but, you know, it's got to, like, travel to the New World at some point for it to be integral to the actual story. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Pluton was found at the South Pole this entire time. I'm like, all right, well, for it to be relevant to the current story, and for the Straw Hats to have to deal with it, and for Robin to see it, and for Frankie to see it, which, you know, that's going to be important, and for the whole thing involving Blackbeard and the Yonko, it's going to have to sail into the Grand Line at some point, so I'd like to just keep it simple and say it is somewhere in the New World. Now, the problem with it being just on some random uninhabited, you know, island, here's the thing. It might be a really good ship, it might be this really advanced ship, but it couldn't just be sitting on some island for 900 years without anybody servicing it. I mean, even Frankie brought this up when he built the Thousand Sunny for the Straw Hats. He basically said, like, even if it's the best ship ever, and this really is the best ship ever, super, you know, it's got atom wood and everything, but unless you have a talented shipwright to actually work on it and repair it, all the day-to-day damage that incurs with it, even if it's the best ship ever made, it's eventually going to deteriorate. So I don't think it can just be like, oh, random island, there's the Pluton, and it's been, you know, run ashore, or it's been hidden by this mountain, or it's been under a cave, you know, in a cave underwater for how many years, in like 900 years or something, you know, without anybody attending to it, without anybody servicing it. I think it would just be a pile of scrap metal. I mean, you could always say maybe it was constructed with this special metal that doesn't rust, or it's still in the great condition it was when it was created, but I think there's got to be somebody there at least caring for the thing in case it ever is needed, right? Now, who could that person be? Well, my mind immediately went to Tom, all right? Tom is interesting. think back to all the different Straw Hat backstories we've had. You know, most of the time when the Straw Hats, you know, they're talking about their backstory and we find out who their benefactors were, the people that kind of, you know, set them down the path to get where they are now, they're usually dead. You know, more often than not, they're dead. You know, Zoro, you know, Kuina, she's gone. Banshina, who was Usopp's mom, she's gone. Bellamir's gone. But when it comes to, not every single one is. Like, Zeph is still alive, you know, and, well, we find out Sabo is later, he's still alive, but then Ace died, so that's kind of a switch there. It's like, I lost one brother, but the one I thought was dead came back, so that's good, I guess. Olvia's dead. Jaguar D. Sol is dead. All of Brooks' crew is dead. Yeah, Fisher Tiger's dead in Jinbei's case. You see the issue here? But then Tom is weird, because Tom, we did not actually see him die. He was being brought away by the government, you know, by CP, I think it was CP5 back then that were bringing Tom away, that Spondum ruled over. And, you know, Frankie rushed out to stop the sea train, and that's when he got hit, and then he had to reconstruct his body into his cyborg form. But we don't know anything that happened to Tom afterwards. He just got taken away on the sea train to Enies Lobby, where he was presumably, you know, he was tried and convicted, and then presumably either executed or brought to Impel Down. Except we were in Impel Down. There was an entire arc focused around Impel Down. And I think, you know, if Tom was going to be an Impel Down, Oda would have included that in that arc. You know, if he was dead set on him being there and, like, the whole time, like, there's no reason why you wouldn't mention him or at least see him in the background or something. That would be a very important plot point. So that's enough evidence for me to say that Tom was definitively not in Impel Down, which basically only leaves two possibilities. Number one, Tom was executed at Marineford, and he's gone now, and it was just never shown, but he is dead. Or number two, Tom managed to somehow escape the government escort either before he arrived in Enies Lobby, which I would assume is the most likely possibility, because once you go through Enies Lobby, through the Tower of Law, through the Gates of Justice, it gets kind of difficult at that point. But then again, keep in mind, he was a fishman. So if anybody could, you know, jump out of the, you know, sea train or out of the escort ship and then land in the water and get away, it was going to be Tom, right? So the chances for escape were definitely better for a fishman or a merman than it was for just a regular human to get away from Enies Lobby, or even in the tub current, somehow manage to escape the tub current with their strong swimming abilities, okay? Not going to be easy, but it's way more possible than a human doing that, right? So I like to think that's the case, because if he was just going to be executed, man, they should have just said that during Frankie's backstory. The fact that Oda left it ambiguous, that's a little strange, don't you think? It would have been a really cool scene, too. Like, we could have had Frankie's flashback end with Frankie getting hit by the sea train, and then the last shot of the flashback is we cut over to Marineford, where Tom is about to be executed the same way Roger was going to be executed, and his last words were like, "You do it with a Dawn!" or something like that, and we didn't get to see it, right? Now, we have seen we have seen Tom's brother Den, who is a merman living on the seafloor, and he's talked about it like, yeah, Tom is dead, he's gone, he's never coming back. But the possibility I'm thinking of here is, what if Tom managed to get away? Tom somehow figured out the location of Pluton. Maybe he knew it this whole time, it's just he just never had any reason to go there, because he had no desire to have a world-destroying super weapon, you know? He did have the blueprints, but maybe on top of the blueprints, maybe the original shipwrights at least knew where it ended up. You know, and maybe a member of the shipwright clan that built Pluton throughout the generations has been tasked with guarding the Pluton at its resting place, making sure it's in ship shape for when it might be needed again in the world to maybe fight back against the world government, which the original intention of building the damn thing was, right? So maybe Tom got away, and he figured there's nowhere else in the world he could really go. He certainly couldn't go back to Water 7. That's the first place they're going to look for him. So he decided, you know, I already built the sea train. That was my magnum opus, so to speak. That was the one thing I wanted to build. Maybe he decided to go to the island where Pluton was because he knew it was out of the way. No one knew where it was. He got there, he found Pluton, and yeah, for the last decade or so, he's just been living on that island and making sure the Pluton is ready to go for whenever it needs to be busted out. So that's my thought there. Now there are obviously a few gaps there, like Tom surviving is a big gap. Would he have known where it was located? That's another big one. But hey, considering it was built on Water 7, I would say it's a pretty good chance that the people that built it would at least know where it ended up. Not 100%, but it's a better odds that they would know where it is, you know what I mean, than anybody else would. So, right, that's my one possibility. Tom is involved. I have one more thought on this, okay? So, if it isn't going to be, let's just say it isn't in any government island, and it's also not on an uninhabited island. It's not just some random place. It might be on Raftel, but if it's on Raftel, that's like endgame stuff, which makes sense because it's a world-ending battleship. So, the Straw Hats find Raftel, the One Piece, plus Pluton, and then maybe Blackbeard steals it like, all right, Straw Hats, say ha ha ha, you can take the One Piece, we'll take Pluton. That would be really cool. But that's like end of the story stuff. The only other places you could think where it would be Elbaf, which is really the only other major island in the New World. I mean, at this point, it's like Elbaf and Raftel, and where else in the New World has really been name dropped that we haven't seen yet? Like other than Elbaf and Raftel, have there ever been any? I guess the last island that the log post points to, that could be a possibility, but we don't know the name of that island yet. I've just called it Last Island, but whatever. So, Elbaf is a possibility. If that's the case, I started thinking of like a giant Viking warship, like the ship of the Norse gods or something, coming out of the sky, the golden, chariots and shit. Maybe not exactly like a metal battleship, maybe like a giant longboat, but still capable of mythical weapons that could just blow an island away. That was one possibility that sounds really cool. Another possibility is maybe it's on one of Shanks's islands, because Shanks has a bunch of islands. He has a bunch of real estate all over the New World, right? And if there was anyone that would not want to use the Pluton, it would probably be Shanks. I mean, out of all of the Yonkos, certainly. If Kaido or Big Mom or Blackbeard got their hands on it, they wouldn't even think twice. They wouldn't even consider the ramifications of busting it out. If Big Mom found it, she would immediately be, like, jumping on that thing and, like, let's go and, take out Kaido and get his poneglyph, and then take out Shanks and then go right toward Marineford. That's basically how it would go, right? But Shanks, he really doesn't have any interest in, starting a giant war with the government or anything, or even finding the One Piece. Shanks is kind of really the same thing with Luffy. He's just all about, being a really, really powerful pirate who also has the most freedom. And Shanks can do and say and drink as much as he wants, basically. He can go wherever he wants. And that's what it really means to be a pirate in his eyes. It's not about finding all this I don't need to find the One Piece. I don't need to destroy the world government. I don't need to find the world-ending super weapon to rule the world. I just need to be myself and chill out on my island with my crew and a giant logger, and I'm good to go, right? So if anybody was going to have it that would be able to keep it safe and keep it secret from the rest of the world, and I'm sure there's some pretty good shipwrights on the Red Hair crew, Shanks might have, he has a bunch of islands dotted all over the world, but maybe Shanks has his main island, the main island that is his headquarters, his Totland, his Wano, his Beehive Island, so to speak. Maybe he has one main island like that, and that's where most of the Red Hair crew chills out. And on that island, maybe underground, where no one can see it, there's Pluton. And maybe the Straw Hat crew might arrive at Shanks' island at some point. Maybe they'll go after they're finished at Wano, they'll head to Elbaf. Where are they going after Elbaf? That's a big question. Maybe they'll land at Shanks' island, and this will be finally the point for, Shanks and Luffy to meet, and maybe Shanks will have the last road poneglyph, and he'll have all this information. It might be a massive exposition dump. And the last thing you might mention is, oh yeah, by the way, we also have Pluton here. You want to see it? Because Shanks obviously trusts the Straw Hat crew. Shanks understands the Straw Hats aren't going to use the weapon to destroy the world. So they could see it, and Frankie would like have an orgasm, and he'd be like, "Oh my God, this is super, this is mega, super, ultra, super, mega," and he would look at it, and he would like, just fanboy out over how it was built. Like, holy crap, how did they build this cannon 900 years ago? And Shanks might actually not have any information on it. He would just be like, I don't really know the whole story behind this thing, but it's here, and I've basically just been keeping it safe because what would happen if anybody got their hands on this, if any of the other Yonko or the Marines or the, God help you, the world government got their hands on this thing. So I've just been keeping it on my island for the last, decade or so. Maybe it was like he found the island first. Maybe it was just a chance thing. Like Shanks happened to land on this island, happened to have the Pluton, and he's like, okay, we're making this island our main base of operations. And he plasters his Jolly Roger all over the place, and everybody knows not not to go near Shanks' island, and because he rules over it, but in secret he built it to keep Pluton safe. Seems like something Shanks would do. I mean, hey, also, at the end of the day, Pluton is really the ultimate bargaining chip. I brought this up when I did Vivi's video a few days ago, but let's say a country had Pluton. They could either keep it secret until the world government decided to make a move, and then they bust it out, and they're like, ha ha ha, we have a bigger gun than you. Or they could use it as a deterrent factor beforehand, but the risk of doing that, the risk of saying, hey, we have the ancient weapon Pluton here, so you better watch yourself, is that, yeah, you might have it, but now you've also given away its location. And everybody knows where it is now, and even though you do have it, people might try to do more sneaky methods and try to get it away from you. So I think the best thing to do in this situation is, if you do have Pluton, if some party, if some kingdom in the world, or Shanks, happens to have the Pluton, they're not going to tell anybody they have it. They're not going to brag about it, they're not going to use it as a bargaining chip, until, of course, it's like the 11th hour. And the world government starts like their massive campaign of just death and destruction across the entire world. Like, we're just wiping everything out. Clean slates, start all over. That's when you bust it out. The only other issue is this has stated that the world government has actually done this before. Not confirmed, but it's been hinted that they've done this kind of like just massive wipeout thing before. And if that's the case, why didn't anyone use Pluton then? But maybe it wasn't found at that point. Maybe the world government did this cleansing like 400 years ago, and then nobody knew where the Pluton is, so it just happened. And now here we are 400 years later, and like, okay, now we have somebody has Pluton somewhere. But okay, those are my thoughts on Pluton. I'm going to be making some videos on the other ancient weapons. I'm going to be talking about Poseidon, of course, and some theories on Uranus and what it is. Giant moon spaceship laser beam. I'm sorry, big frog in my throat there. But yeah, other than that, be thankful that you have electricity, because that's a really great thing to have. Okay, I have to go finish up the rest of that boar, though, because, you know, I did end up, you know, I captured it, so I have to finish cleaning it, and that's going to be my dinner tonight. But everybody have a good one. Tekking, signing out.